Have you ever played a game that was so absolutely incredible that when it finished you just had to sit there and watch the credits roll in silence? Because I know I have, and I'd say it feels like just as much a curse as it does a blessing. I just finished my third and final playthrough of Resident Evil Requiem, and I got the Platinum Trophy, but whilst playing through the final section of the game for the last time, I knew that nothing would feel like this for a while. Obviously, this isn't just limited to Resident Evil, but I love that game, and it's exactly the kind of experience I'm talking about. Sitting there stunned, reflecting on the journey you just had. I've had that same hollow yet satisfied feeling numerous times, and I can confidently say that it never gets any easier. The realisation that you've become so invested in the world and its characters that it feels almost impossible to detach and move on to a new world with new characters. Of course, you can go back and revisit that game, but it will never feel how it did the first time you played it. But what is the difference between a great game and a game that will always resonate with you? I know that's a subjective statement because everyone has different opinions on games, some quite strong opinions I might add. You can play a game, float your way through the story, mainly focusing on the combat or the exploration, and when it comes to the end you just turn it off, say it was cool and go about your day. But when a game sticks with you, it really does. Some titles set our expectations and standards so high that everything we delve into afterwards feels bland and slightly diminished. For example, when I first played Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, it was incredible. The world was expansive yet incredibly detailed, and it was far too easy for me to lose hours of my day within it. It gave me an unforgettable experience. I mean, I'm still playing it now. But when I eventually set the world of Bohemia aside to try a new game, it didn't feel quite right. And I don't mean whatever I picked up afterwards was bad, it just wasn't what I was used to. I'd spent so long forging swords with Radovan and brewing potions at the alchemy bench that it subconsciously altered what I expected from games. Now, explaining the exact criteria for what makes a memorable game is quite difficult. There are certain elements from all kinds of games that make them momentous. Take Uncharted 4 for example. Amazing gameplay, exploration, combat, with a great story and characters that make it really shine. So when I finished it, I realised just how accustomed I'd become to Nathan Drake's charismatic nature,
like 400 million bucks. Let's go.
Elena's grounded perspective, and the natural banter between the group.
The gods see us making for that cross.
But they don't see us. Jesus, you guys act like you never spend time in prison. If you want something dirty done, then you wait for lights out.
The characters were just so well written and voiced that by the time the story finished, I'd become so familiarised with their presence, which made moving on to another game feel strangely devoid. The world that you play in is also another key ingredient to crafting a game that will live on eternally in your mind. And a game that does this beautifully is Red Dead Redemption 2. And I know that seems like an obvious choice because everyone always says how great it is, but it's just too good not to mention. The world design is astonishingly immersive, the NPCs combined with the scenery, and the endless possibility of exploration makes for a memorable experience that you'll be regretful to leave behind once something new comes along. Of course, you can't mention the core factors of a video game without talking about the story. It's all well and good having a rich and lively world, an array of intriguing characters, but without an absorbing narrative, it's all for nothing. Personally, a game that has one of the best stories is The Last of Us. And it's at this point I'm realising I might have a slight bias towards Naughty Dog. It's not my fault that they develop such emotionally impactful games, both through their stories and their characters. Anyway, while it was hard to narrow down the stories of countless games, The Last of Us stands out to me because it takes a seemingly familiar idea and turns it into something unforgettable. As easy as it is to separate these games into categories such as world, story and characters, these games don't shine purely due to one element. In fact, the reason that they stay with us so long is because they excel in all of these areas. Not just the games I mentioned, but countless others. They succeed in staying memorable because everything works perfectly in tandem. There isn't a singular standout feature in these titles, because if you were to remove everything else, it wouldn't feel right. Of course, there are elements you like more than others, but it's how their narrative, characters and worlds intertwine to seamlessly form that experience that is so hard to leave behind. For instance, it would be insane to praise The Last of Us without mentioning Joel and Ellie, whose dynamic is what gives the game its emotional core.
I walked into my sister's room and tripped on a bra. It was a booby trap. A book just fell on my head. I only have myself to blame. Or wait, I said it wrong. Hold on, let me read it again. A book just fell on my head. I only have my shelf to blame.
Or talk about the bleak post-pandemic world that forces the relationship to develop as it does. Likewise, Red Dead Redemption 2 is always heavily regarded for its world, but it would be far less meaningful if it weren't the backdrop for the story of Arthur Morgan and his gang. The same can be said for Uncharted 4, where the lovable cast of characters are almost inseparable from the cinematic environments they explore and the story that unfolds on their journey. I mean, it's practically impossible to praise games that are so good just for a singular element. Another part of what makes these experiences so special is that they can only truly happen once. The first time you are a part of the story, you're introduced to the characters and you explore the world. Everything feels new and unpredictable. You don't know how it'll end or what's waiting around the corner, and that sense of discovery makes everything feel incredibly impactful. Returning to these games can be just as enjoyable, but the magic that's created from the first playthrough can never be fully replicated. And personally, that's why I'll always prefer story games to live service multiplayer games. Purely because of that first time playthrough. Nothing is repetitive and you never know what to expect, and those styles of games evoke such distinct emotions. But once you know the twists, the emotional moments, and the outcome of the journey, the experience changes. It's still memorable, but it never carries the same sense of wonder it did the first time. After finishing incredible narrative-driven games like these, with a whole range of unforgettable moments, it's hard to move on to something new, purely because you built up such a strong connection. Anything you delve into hasn't piqued your interest, the characters are unfamiliar, and the story hasn't had the time to settle yet. And I'm not saying every single game you pick up after this will be automatically terrible, it's just that expectations have been raised so high that new games almost feel like they're struggling to catch up. That's why truly remarkable titles almost spoil gaming, in the best way obviously. Part of the hollow feeling that emerges upon completion comes from the amount of time we spend immersed in these worlds. When a game manages to seamlessly combine a compelling narrative, engaging characters and a lavishly detailed environment, it becomes more than just something you play for a few hours of an evening. It consumes every moment of your waking day. You become invested in everything about the game, and by the time the credits roll, it feels like you're leaving behind a world that you became part of and truly lived in. Summarising everything I've said, the games that always feel the hardest to move on from are the ones that truly excel at being a gripping adventure, or become something that you're unable to put down or can't wait to invest more time into. They present worlds that feel alive and enticing, characters feel realistic and believable, and stories leave a genuinely emotional impact. So, maybe calling the hollow feeling of finishing a game a curse isn't entirely accurate. If anything, the strange emptiness that follows is exactly what the developers of these titles set out to achieve. The games that they made fulfilled their destiny of pulling us into their own little universes, wrapping us up in all the tension and excitement. And while that might make the next game a little harder to latch onto, it's the reason that this feeling exists, because it's why we keep searching for experiences like them in the first place. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to like and subscribe and switch on notifications. I'm Kat from Friendly Fire, and this is why great games always make us feel the worst.